In recent weeks, rumors have been growing louder in Washington that a hidden confrontation is brewing inside the White House, one that could escalate into a genuine conspiracy. It is a complex and multi-layered game in which the key figure is Vice President J.D. Vance, a man who just a few years ago openly called Donald Trump an idiot and compared him to Hitler, and who now finds himself at the very center of his administration. According to sources close to the national security apparatus, cited by Politico and confirmed by The Atlantic, Vance and his circle have been holding increasingly frequent closed-door consultations with select groups of Republican congressmen, presenting them as working meetings on economic issues. But informed officials claim that these meetings are not only about tariffs or agricultural subsidies, they also involve discussions of scenarios for redistributing power within the administration itself. Behind the scenes, the term quiet transition is being mentioned more and more often, a model in which the vice president gradually gains more authority at the president's expense under the pretext of his overload with foreign policy crises. The Washington Post notes that concern was triggered by an episode involving a leak from a government signal chat, when an editor from The Atlantic was accidentally added to the group and gained access to discussions on military strikes against Yemen. In the correspondence, it was Vance who criticized the necessity of the strike against the Houthis, calling it a dangerous mistake, and this position contradicted Trump's line. It was the first documented moment when the vice president openly displayed disagreement with the president on strategic issues. According to former National Security Council staff, the White House reacted extremely nervously to this episode, as public demonstration of division in U.S. military policy is a direct gift to Iran, China, and Russia. Reuters, citing its own sources in Congress, claims that Vance, in private conversations with senators, uses rhetoric about the need for a more pragmatic line, and that the president is subject to outdated impulses, which in political language amounts to a soft but systematic subversive campaign. Insiders from the Republican Finance Committee told the Financial Times that Vance has been actively lobbying projects linked to his own investments in biotechnology and artificial intelligence startups, creating an obvious conflict of interest. The vice president is gaining leverage over government programs funded from the federal budget, allowing him to build his own network of loyal allies. Think tanks close to the Pentagon have already produced alarming reports, noting that Vance and his advisors are building an alternative vertical of influence, a group of experts, media commentators, and congressmen capable of backing him rather than the president in a crisis. The New York Times, citing a senior official, writes that in January, the vice president initiated a closed-door meeting at the Capitol where questions of power succession in the event of extraordinary circumstances were discussed. Officially, it was about security protocols, but the tone of the discussion, sources emphasize, made it sound as if Vance was considering a scenario in which the president could be removed or sidelined under congressional pressure. The behavior of Vance's inner circle reinforces this picture. According to Axios, his communications advisor maintains close contacts with a number of influential editors of conservative publications and is reportedly laying the groundwork for an information campaign that could hit Trump in the event of a sharp drop in ratings or new legal pressure. Moreover, several Politico sources claim that so-called roadmaps are already circulating within government structures, outlining how presidential powers could be redistributed to the vice president during a crisis, formally citing the 25th Amendment to the Constitution. All of this creates an extremely dangerous situation. In Washington, the question is growing louder. Is the country preparing for a new form of internal coup, not through the streets and protests, but through bureaucratic mechanisms, where the key instrument would be Vice President Vance's loyal network of allies? Analysts at the Brookings Institution believe the situation resembles classic scenarios of soft palace coups, when a leader becomes isolated from their own apparatus. On Vance's side are his youth, the support of part of Silicon Valley's corporate circles, and growing sympathy from those Republicans who are tired of the constant crises surrounding Trump. On Trump's side remains his personal charisma and direct connection with the electorate, but with his weakening approval ratings, that may not be enough. According to an insider quoted by The Atlantic, the atmosphere in the White House corridors is one of mistrust. People do not know who will be targeted tomorrow and who will suddenly be appointed to a key position at Vance's initiative. There is no official confirmation of a conspiracy, and the vice president continues to publicly demonstrate loyalty. But the more leaks and behind-the-scenes meetings appear, the more tangible the shadow over the White House becomes, and the more often the question arises of whether the story of J.D. Vance will turn into a new chapter in American politics, one written not at the ballot box but through backroom intrigue. The longer this hidden dynamic unfolds, the clearer it becomes that this is not just about the vice president's personal ambitions, but about the construction of an entire alternative power structure. While Trump continues to focus on tariff wars and attempts to project strength internationally, his deputy is quietly laying the groundwork for a technological revolution under his own brand. What makes the situation especially alarming is that, according to NBC News, in classified briefings for the Senate, Vance has repeatedly presented alternative threat assessments that directly contradict the positions of the National Security Council and the president himself. One participant in these briefings described the situation as the existence of two foreign policy lines within a single administration, which in a time of global instability effectively means a split in America's course. CNN adds in its analytical review that Vance is deliberately cultivating the image of a sober pragmatist, contrasting with Trump's emotional style. The media, which once criticized Trump, are increasingly embracing this image, presenting Vance as the future of the Republican Party. According to Axios, over the past 3 months, the number of mentions of Vance in major publications has nearly doubled, and he is increasingly portrayed not as the second in command, but as an independent political leader. All of this creates an accumulation effect. Media narratives, economic ties, bureaucratic maneuvers, and leaks are forming a coherent picture. And although no one is yet speaking openly about a palace coup, in Washington the phrase controlled transfer of power is being heard more and more often. Translated into the language of real politics, this means that in the event of a worsening crisis, whether international or domestic, part of the elite is prepared to support Vance as the less radical option. The Economist, in its latest issue, states directly that the administration has found itself in a position where internal contradictions may be no less dangerous than external threats. And if Trump counted on the absolute loyalty of his vice president, there are now growing signs that this loyalty is nothing more than a carefully constructed facade. Some insiders even claim that Vance uses the rhetoric of loyalty to the president solely as a tool to maintain access to information and resources, while his team simultaneously builds its own channels of influence. As a result, the United States faces a troubling prospect. For the first time in decades, the real center of power may begin to shift not through elections, but through internal bureaucratic maneuvering inside the White House itself. And if these processes are not stopped, in the coming months, America could face an unprecedented phenomenon, a situation in which the president remains the formal head of state, but actual control passes to his deputy and his inner circle.